Thank you, David. It's such a pleasure to be here and to connect with this wonderful group of people who have done just excellent work in moving the memorial forward. So thank you for having us. As David said, I'm Dr. Phyllis Slade-Martin. I'm a historian and independent scholar and owner of Slade Associates, LLC. It was my great pleasure to serve as the competition advisor for this project. The final design, Hearth, by William Sendor, class of 2011, was unveiled in 2020, and construction is slated to begin in 2021. I just want to say, let's give a big applause right now to see how quickly they're moving this project forward. So a big round of applause for the committee. Today's panel consists of the project's key stakeholders. Panelists will consider frequently asked questions as they discuss involvement and their role in the upcoming memorial to the enslaved. So we want you to, all of the attendees, to feel a part of this as well. And we encourage your dialogue in the chat. We encourage you to write questions in the chat. And as much as time permits, we will work to reserve some time at the end to have a bit of Q&A. So please engage, please applaud, show some love to our panelists. It's my pleasure now to introduce today's panelists. Dr. Jody Allen is the Robert Francis Engs Director of the Lemon Project. She's Assistant Professor of History, and she's also on the Executive Committee of the Lemon Project Committee on Memorialization. Welcome, Jody. Dr. Chon Glover is Chief Diversity Officer and Co-Chair of the Building Committee. Let's welcome Chon. You can wave. Dr. Susan Kern is the Executive Director of the Historic Campus. She's Adjunct Associate Professor of History, and also she's on the Committee on Memorialization. She's on the Executive Committee. And Ed Pease is Architect and Senior Lecturer of Art. He's also a member of the Executive Committee of the Lemon Project Committee on Memorialization. Burt Pinnock is the Principal Chairman of the Board for Baskervill, the architectural firm. And let's give a big round of applause and welcome to William Sendor. He is the winning designer. Will, as we will refer to him, is a 2011 graduate of William and Mary, and he's also an architect. So we're excited to be here and excited to hear what these panelists will share with us today. So Jody, let's start with you. If you can discuss what led to the decision to build a memorial, talk a little bit about the resolution, the course, and as we move toward the competition.
Okay. Well, thank you, and hi, everybody. So my task, as Phyllis has said, is to take us from the resolution to the competition. And so in 2007, the Student Assembly at William and Mary called on William and Mary to study its history as a slaveholder, make that history public, and to build a memorial to the enslaved. And so that resolution passed. The following year, there was a similar resolution made by the faculty. They brought in an outside researcher who submitted a report to the Board of Visitors, and the report was turned into the resolution establishing the Lemon Project, among other things. So fast forward to 2014, and Ed Pease and I taught a class called Memorializing the Enslaved at William and Mary. The class was a mix of local community members, undergrads, a couple graduate students, and a couple of administrators, or well, staff, I should say, I guess, at the college. And so the class, out of the class came the Lemon Project Committee on Memorialization, which we call LIPCOM. And we began meeting in the spring of 2015 and decided on a few key things that we believe should be part of the memorial. One, that it should be on the historic campus, that it should be a place of contemplation, and it should include the names of the enslaved people that we found, but also include a space where the names, additional names, can be added as research continues. And so we had a couple challenges in that list. One was that the location of the memorial. There was certainly some challenges and some real feelings about it being on the historic campus, but that hill was climbed, and that was approved, that it would happen be located somewhere on the historic campus. The second challenge was that we wanted to do a competition, idea competition, instead of a traditional RFP or request for proposals. We wanted anybody to be able to enter the competition. And so if you could clearly articulate your idea in a written narrative, and you could draw stick figures if you had to explain what you thought it should look like, but you could enter. And so once we got that through procurement, then we were able to launch the competition in the fall of 2018. And we got 84 entries from 4 different continents. 80 were eligible to be considered. We had a jury of 9. The jury, this whole process was completely blind. The jury did not know, they only saw designs. They did not see names or any information about the entrance. And so they selected 3 designs that were submitted then to the president, who selected 1 design, and that was submitted to the Board of Visitors. It was accepted, and so we were able in 2019 to announce the winning design. And so I'm going to stop here and turn it over to Will, who was the winning designer.
Thank you, Jody. Thank everyone for having me. So I'm going to talk for just a little bit about the concept and some of the thinking behind the concept, and also show you the actual competition entry that I produced. I think this is the first time that anyone has seen the whole competition publicly. So it's exciting to be able to share it with all of you. So first of all, as previously mentioned, I'm a graduate of William & Mary. I graduated in 2011. So that was shortly after the Lemon Project had really started. So there was a lot of research still happening, and I wasn't fully aware of all of the history at that point. So when I heard in 2018, so after William & Mary, I went on to architecture school. I've been working in architecture firms. Then in 2018, I saw this call for submissions for a memorial design for the to the enslaved people enslaved by William & Mary. And I just thought, I had to enter, William & Mary is very dear to my heart. And I thought this was a story that really needed to be told, and that I could at least submit an entry to the general discourse about this. And so in my process, I started out and I started out researching about slavery in Virginia, and then I found a book by another William and Mary graduate, Jennifer Ost, who had written a book about institutional slavery in Virginia. So that's specifically institutions like William and Mary or churches or other universities that own slaves. So not a traditional slave owner, but an actual institution that owned people. And so throughout this book, in this book, there was a chapter about William and Mary, and it had a lot of stories about the life of the enslaved people and their toil and the brutal treatment and just the struggle. And throughout that research that I was reading, I kept being struck by this idea of fire. Throughout the whole school year, the enslaved people were always in contact with fire, whether it was chopping down trees in the woods to make firewood, or whether it was tending to the fires day and night in the winter, cooking, cleaning. There was so much of this connection to fire. And that really, to me, was this kind of theme that transcended and that transcended all of their toil and struggle. And then I started thinking about, how is it that us in present day, other than just seeing names on a wall, how is it that we can be physically connected to these people beyond just hearing their stories? And so I started having this idea about, well, could we have a place where we could light a fire? And it's our action in the present day of lighting a fire, of illuminating a space, of gathering around a fire together, that we could better, we are building a fire to honor them and to connect with them and to better understand their story. And also, that idea of coming together, of healing, this idea of warmth and welcoming. And so I kind of had that idea of fire swirling around. And then I just thought, oh, the hearth, that idea of welcoming, of a place, that is warm, that you can gather around almost as a family would. And so that was kind of the thematic inspiration. And so I'm going to share with you the competition entry. So can everyone see this? Just a thumbs up from some of the people that have the video on. Okay. So this is how the competition entry started. And it was a poem by an abolitionist poet. I won't read the whole thing, but the last line really struck me. And it was this idea of our own warm hearth seemed blazing free. And so this idea of creating a hearth, a welcoming space that would be blazing free for the present and also the future. And then this was kind of a conceptual slide showing how fire, this is in colonial Williamsburg. There's a tradition of fire and also of masonry building. Let's see. Then this idea, a formal idea, can we bring in some African heritage? These people, the enslaved people, had a very strong heritage beyond what we traditionally think of as their colonial presence. So can we bring some of that heritage and history into the design? And this idea of gathering, this is drawing in Spotsylvania County. So this idea of gathering around a fire, can we bring that idea of family and togetherness? And then finally, thinking of a hearth, this is, we look at remnants of old houses, especially plantation houses. And what is the thing that remains, enduring for well beyond the lifetime of the house. And it's that masonry fireplace that is the thing that remains and lasts, and it has that sense of memory in it. So the concept that I came up with was this idea of a hearth that we would build out of the brick that's on campus. And that was a very deliberate decision. I didn't want it to seem foreign. I wanted it to seem like a place that these people and their memory would be part of the campus because they built the campus. And then this idea of carving out from that masonry form, using some of the lines of African pottery to carve out a void that represented the suffering and the pain, but also created a space for the hearth to be illuminated. And then finally creating a communal space in front of the hearth that you could have an intimate gathering. You could have these kind of healing times, whether it's someone sitting there on their way to class or a larger gathering, or you could turn it into a stage for a performance and other events that would again look towards the future and tell the story of the past, but also bring people together. And then finally, having the names of the enslaved being a very prominent part. So I'll just go quickly through some of the other images. This is the location and kind of the site plan that I proposed. And this is really where it is now, still in the design. So this is the Wren building. The campus center is over here. This is Jamestown Road. And so this idea of putting it in this clearing that as a student, I had always walked by and thought about this clearing, kind of has this feel to it, almost like I was just kind of drawn to this space, but it's framed very well by these trees. And then the other thing is through the research, I found that this side of the Wren building was used by many of the enslaved people throughout their day. So this space that we can gather today and tomorrow to connect with the struggle and the toil and the harsh conditions of those people and learn their story. So here's some more drawings of this kind of communal space in a large fire chamber within the wall that people could gather around, and then a stage. So these are some more drawings. And then this is showing kind of its connection to the Wren building over here, how it's using similar materials, decisively breaking through the existing wall that is there on campus, which I think Burt might talk about in a little while. And then just creating this gathering space and this idea that at the same time, it's something that can be illuminated, but it's also this kind of dark void that you see from many directions, and you're kind of drawn to that. And then I imagined, similar to the Yule log ceremony and the grand illumination, these other events in Williamsburg and at William and Mary, where fire is used to bring people together. I imagine that once or twice a year, maybe, or maybe more, there could be a ceremony and you light the fire, and it becomes an illuminated, active space where we can reflect, come together, and heal. And then another thing was looking at how the names of the enslaved would be enshrined on these larger masonry elements that would protrude boldly and cast shadows at different times of day, to kind of elevate those people and their memory. And finally, a space that you could actually inhabit. You could go inside, and it has a curving geometry that is completely foreign to the rest of the architecture on campus, but that you can use that contrast to understand and look back on that colonial history. here's a closer look at how I had originally imagined the bricks and the names of the people that the Lemon Project has found through research that were enslaved by William and Mary or at William and Mary.
Will, thank you so much. That was excellent. You provided an excellent overview of the project, and we'll come back with some questions. We want to encourage all of the participants to ask any questions that you might have. But William, bravo, that was beautifully explained. We're going to now ask Burt to talk about moving from the design concept to a buildable memorial.
Great, thank you, Phyllis. Thank you, everyone, for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, and subsequent to the competition, and then in the fall of 2019, the university then put out a request for proposal to professional architectural engineering firms to take on the challenge of designing the memorial to be built. And so we, along with Will, as part of one of our team members, responded to the RFP, which included structural engineers, landscape architects, civil engineers, electrical engineers, and all of those kinds of disciplines that you need to sort of bring things to fruition. While it seems like it wouldn't be that complicated, oh, just wait, it is. And so the intent was to, as much as possible, maintain the original concept that Will won the competition with. And if you noticed, it was all a very curving, vaulted, carved brick structure. So we actually had a consultant out of Rome, Italy, to work with us to try to understand how we could do this as a self-supporting brick structure, much like you would want it to be. And then we ran into, no pun intended, the brick wall of a budget, and determined that it was not within our reach to do a fully self-supporting brick structure. And then with the things like where the stage sat, there is a underground vault that had to be spanned with concrete structure that you would never see. And then we got into things like, well, there's a stage, how's the ramp work? Is there railing? How do you comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act? And there are those kinds of things that start to eat away at projects. Fortunately, we had Will, and Will and I have had some spirited conversations about how this moves forward, and I have great respect for this guy, no doubt. So what I'm going to do is sort of pick up a little bit where Will left off. What you're looking at is ultimately the current site plan. So if you recall, the Wren building is to the upper right of the screen, Jamestown Road is to the lower left. So I'm skipping through a number of steps that we've gone through to get to this point. One of the things that evolved in this process was, Will pointed out sort of the historic work yard of the Enslaved at the south end of the Wren building. And through further work with the building committee and Susan Kern and her team, understanding that there is somewhat of a historic work path that can kind of be identified to the right here towards the Wren building. And then what came to pass is that the Legacy Circle, adjacent to Jefferson Hall, is a tribute to the first African-American graduates of William and Mary. So there is this opportunity to expand what Will has already laid out, that has a little bit more of a connection, a temporal connection to the college and its history, and looking forward to the future of what is yet to be. Working with Will and the landscape architects and understanding that, okay, the the stage presented a challenge to us to do, and how do we maintain the gathering space that is intended while still connecting it to the open green space. So what you're saying off to the right is this idea of creating a simple berm, so out of the landscape, something that doesn't become intrusive, something that still honors the idea of this gathering space, excuse me, is created just to the right. And so the project expanded, contracted, expanded, contracted, but you can see the idea that the memorial, and is my cursor showing up? Yes, no? No, okay. I won't worry about it. That it remains pretty much as well noted on this footprint of the existing wall that defined the Wren Yard. So through iterations, the last image of the concept that Will won the competition with, through a few months ago, the iteration of the design, one of the things that expanded was the idea of the number of enslaved. I think from the time that the project was awarded to us till now, I'm going to say 80, 90 additional names have been added to the list. That continuously expanding recognition of named and unnamed enslaved. So the question was, how do we expand the number of bricks without actually expanding the memorial? It was an elegant idea, certainly, but then the logistics of how do you, say in 10 years, how do you add on to the memorial became a complicating factor. So we had to sort of rethink, reboot, maybe on how that happened. The original competition entry had a carve on one side where the fire pit, a carve on the second side where wood burning logs would be stored. The logistics of burning wood fires on campus took up, I want to say, of the 12 building committee meetings we had, probably took up about half of them. In conversations on how are we going to do that, or can we do that? So we have to work through DEB, or basically the Department of Engineering and Buildings for the state of Virginia, that is like the governing agency for building codes and constructability for the state. We work through William & Mary's own design review board through the process. We work through the state's art and architecture review board through the process. So there's a lot of sort of regulatory hurdles in there. So the result was we would create a space for the vessel where fires can be burned, but only by special events, and certainly under the control of the facilities group at the university. So that's where we were about when the construction manager for the project was brought on board. Construction manager comes on board to sort of work through the constructability of the project with us. You know, as architects and designers, we draw things on papers, and then we want to work with people who build things with their hands, or work with people who build things with their hands, to understand exactly how this is going to be done. I mentioned the budget and the beautifully carved, ultimately concrete forms that we had still honored the competition design for sure, but presented challenges in maintaining the budget and constructability. And another challenge that was introduced is that while it could be done, there were not a lot of companies that could do it. We were talking with concrete form companies as far away as California on how to do this. And what that meant was we were limiting the ability to engage our local and minority-owned businesses in the project. There are actually not a lot of materials. There's concrete, there's brick, there's landscaping, there's metal work, a little bit of electrical work and lighting, but not a lot else. So wanting to also make sure that the descendants of the very people that this is serving can participate in the process is very important to the university. So what you're looking at is sort of a transparent model of the sort of concept on the left, where we were just looking at, and then ultimately where we landed with a tweaked concept on the right to try and get to something that respects the idea and meets the budget. Will talked about the idea of drawing inspiration from sort of the African cultures and arts and heritage in the design. And so we wanted to make sure that we continued to do that, because I would say it's something like, we talk about it as generational identity. You know, if you look at the list of the enslaved, you will notice that a lot of them are identified simply as enslaved man, enslaved woman, enslaved child, because there is no self-identity there. So the goal of making sure that remained a part of the design was very important. So as we looked at this with Will, we said the idea of the forms, the sinuous hearth opening forms, is maintained on the faces of the memorial. And instead of the complex curves now, we're looking at somewhat of a more simpler curve. And the result is what you see in that dark inner part is a wall, a spine, we call it the spine, that begins to sort of harken back to the wall that was there, but in a way that reveals, if you will, sort of a dark truth that is being uncovered. And so this is where the design sits today, moving forward. And I'm gonna go quickly through these. The idea of the berm, and what you'll see here are beginnings of inscriptions or the narrative. In Will's competition entry, you saw some images of text and words, and sort of getting to those and what they actually are is part of the work that's going on now. We're relying on a lot of historical figures that are related to or have connections with the college, as well as national and internationally known figures. The vessel, again, is one of those that's in design right now, again, drawing from those ideas of African heritage, particularly Western African art and heritage, is the inspiration. We hope that this will be an artist's piece, basically to complement the original artist named Will Sendor. Lighting is in work, so how do we light the memorial? And so doing it such that sort of this now new spine is properly illuminated, that will have quotes on it from India Gonzalez and Anna Julia Cooper and others. And then more importantly, the lighting of the inscribed bricks with the names of enslaved. We're down to the details at this point. The team is a couple of weeks away from trying to finish up the details. I think we have jumped over every hurdle, regulatory hurdle, that we have to. And I'm looking at Chon. Hopefully she's okay. Got a good head nod there. And that's where we are today. I will say, this has been an incredibly emotional process. This is a space that I work in, not only here, but in other places, on this idea of a reckoning with the enslaved. And this quote from India Gonzalez, I think, is extremely special, because I want to take a shout out to the college, to William and Mary, and to Susan Kern and the building committee for allowing us to take 6 historic brick date from the early 1700s that will be placed in this wall, 6 very special brick. And only you, the 122 people on this call, will know they're there, but they will hopefully represent sort of the legacies of those that have been enslaved with William and Mary. So I'm going to stop there, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Burt. Thank you very much. As you were talking in the chat, we had a number of questions. Many of your questions have been answered through the chat, but I do want to share that Deirdre, class of 2008, said, "I can't wait to visit. I was on campus and saw the sign for the future site and was so excited." And she said, "Thank you so much for pulling and pushing and researching this." So kudos to all of the panelists for making this happen. I'm gonna ask Susan just to talk a couple minutes about the historic significance of the space and the location.
Thank you, Phyllis. Yeah, it's been a true honor to be part of this project. When I came into the job of Director of Historic Campus in 2014, we had these questions of where, we need to find slave quarters so we can talk about slavery on campus. And it didn't take me too long to think about, actually, we probably have the oldest institutional slave quarter, which is the building we call the Wren Building, right? All of our early campus is a site of slavery. And this challenge to rethink our early history, our history, actually a longer history that we have with slavery than since the end of slavery. To make the argument that historic campus is the site of slavery and should be the place for this memorial was hugely significant. So the memorial breaks through a wall that was put on campus in 1932 by John D. Rockefeller's architects in sort of drawing a line between what was part of the Rockefeller restoration and the rest of campus. And that wall has loomed large in local history because the walls symbolize who is allowed to be on campus and who is not allowed to be on campus. And also, they've been challenging for us to argue that William and Mary's history with slavery is well beyond just the colonial story that the restored buildings tell. So thinking about all of the property that William and Mary owned during the period of slavery as having a role in telling the story of slavery on campus is important. And so this location, sort of anchors that history outside the buildings that are there, and then also challenges us to think about both the breaks and the continuities between the parts of campus.
Thank you very much, Susan. I'm gonna go to Ed, and then we're gonna circle back to Chon to just give some brief information on, first we'll ask Ed if you can just talk briefly about the memorial and how it relates to other memorial designs. And then Chon, after Ed, if you could just say a couple brief comments about the building committee as it connects to what Burt talked about a minute ago. Okay, Ed.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis. That's such a simple question, and I can answer it in an hour or two, but we have a couple of minutes. So, but no, I just want agree with Susan's comment that it has been such an honor and a pleasure to work with this group. And Burt has made a couple of references to what seemed like it should be an easy project is so much work, and just standing on the outside and observing everything that he and his team and Will and all of them have put into this is just, it's really, really remarkable. And I think the college will be very grateful for all this when it's all said and done. But to get to your question, Phyllis, I think it's a really big question because there are so many memorials in the world, and particularly in this recent time, memorials and monuments are such a topic of discussion, whether they be historic monuments and the controversies that arise from that, or more contemporary things. And of course, we have pop-up monuments and permanent monuments, and there's so many things to think about. But in terms of memorials that occur, or memorials like this, sorry, I have a puppy in here, forgive that extra noise. Memorials like this that are on a university campus and are memorials to the enslaved, there just aren't that many of them. And probably most of the people watching this are familiar with the one at University of Virginia that was just built. And then there are a handful of others, University of North Carolina and Brown University. And again, there's a handful of others. But I think what came out of the class that Jody and I taught in our many discussions with the students and looking at dozens and dozens of other memorials was that we felt strongly, and it was reflected in the competition brief as Jody described it, that this needed to be a place, and the memorial needed to be an inseparable part of the landscape of this historic campus, as opposed to more of an object in the landscape. And if in the spectrum of memorials, and this is a very unscientific way to put it, but there are those that are more objects and those like the Vietnam Memorial, which are inseparable from their place. And I think the decision and the fact that the college has accepted that this memorial should be built in the historic campus was crucial to this whole thing. And the design that Will came up with and that Burt and his team and Will have further developed, it really fits that description. It is very much a part of the context of this historic campus, which is again, most of the people watching this are familiar with it and have probably been there many times, and a very identifiable, measurable kind of context in terms of the architecture, the building architecture, how those buildings touch the ground and how they meet the sky, the existing landscape, and the kind of it's an informal landscape actually that's really quite beautiful. The geometric pathways, there's so many things that are just a part of that is a part of this context that have been taken into account in this memorial, and particularly in the final scheme where there has been this gentle transformation of the terrain around the memorial. I think is going to be a really significant thing that will create this more of an embracing connection between the land itself and the memorial. And so in that regard, this memorial will have much more in common with memorials such as the Vietnam Memorial and with the one at UVA, which too is very much inseparable from its landscape.
Thank you, Ed. And Chon, will you talk a little bit about the building committee?
Sure. I agree with what everyone has said. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this this project. What you have seen in the last hour is the work of the building committee. So each capital project on campus has a building committee, and most of these people on the panel are on the building committee. And we just shepherd the process throughout, from the beginning, from the concept design being selected until the end of the project. So we had the opportunity to select Baskervill and to work with construction company and to actually reach our goal for fundraising in August. So it's just a wonderful pleasure to be this far, to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We've all worked hard to get this to a place of this. So I'm really happy about it. So thank you to all of you who have been great members of the committee. And we look forward to an exciting time as we start breaking ground.
Thank you. Wonderful, Chon. Carolyn Watson is also a part of the group, and we want to just give kudos to Carolyn for keeping the questions rolling. A number of the questions have been responded to in the chat, so I encourage you to look at some of the responses in the chat. One of the questions that came up had to do with is the brick of the memorial going to be the same color? Will it blend in with the surrounding buildings? But I also want to give Carolyn an opportunity. I just wanted to recognize her for doing a great job, and chime in if you would like to certainly make any comments regarding the discussion. Okay, and so one of the questions that is posted is just looking at some of the events and activities. And I was going to ask Jody if you can talk a little bit about what are some of the ways in which the broader community, the campus community, and the greater Williamsburg community and beyond will be able to engage with the site and with the memorial.
Well, what we're hoping in the beginning when we came up with the idea for the competition, one of the things we included was that it would be a space for contemplation. So we are certainly hoping that students, faculty, people from the community will maybe come over to eat lunch, talk with friends or what have you, or just walk by and see it. Also, there will be opportunities for faculty to take classes out there, or for students to, student organizations to, if they don't mind, sitting around and maybe meet there. We're hoping that people from the community will come on with family reunions to see it and to maybe take pictures at the memorial. So I hope that it will become a new place for new traditions at William & Mary. We have a lot of traditions around graduation, around coming in, as first-year students and those types of things. And so maybe new traditions we hope will rise out of the memorial. So we're, I think, open for, of course, we want to be sure that that it remains a place of respect. But I think we're really open to people coming and using it, and seeing the names and maybe thinking about those people who were there long before us, but remembering them, because that's one of I think the most important things about this is they were lost for so long. They were ignored in the archives, and their names were there, or their existence was there, but they were lost. And so we're hoping that we are finding them, and acknowledging them and their place in William & Mary's history. So again, hopefully many things will be happening at and around the memorial.
Well, thank you, Jody. Thank you very much. And there was a earlier question that came up asking Will if you can share the name of the book again that you referenced. And then if you can just spend a minute talking about, as you see your vision of the design and the original design that you had, and all of the things in terms of finances that impact some of the adjustments in the design. What are your feelings? What are your thoughts? This was a question that, do you think anything important is being sacrificed because of funding?
Okay, so to answer the first question, the book was by Jennifer Ose, and it's called Institutional Slavery, Slaveholding Churches, Schools, Colleges, and Businesses in Virginia from 1680 to 1860. I think someone might have even responded in the chat. Now, the second question. I think that's a really good question, because of course we enter as designers into a competition just full of ideas. You know, I didn't even know it was going to win, so you just shoot for the moon. You know, you try to keep it somewhat realistic, but of course in the design process, in the architectural world, you know, there's always things that are changing. Everything changes, and I think you could sit and say, okay, this was sacrificed, and oh, the budget sacrificed this. But I think another way to look at it is also that whenever we have constraints like budget or site, is to kind of reverse the thinking on that and think of it as opportunities, or what has the budget allowed us to think about in another way. And I would like to also say that when I did the competition, it was just me. It was a personal thing, but then now able to be working with a diverse team, a great team from Baskervill, Burt and everyone, it's really that opportunity to bring more minds into it. And so, you know, sometimes you say, oh, well, we lost this part of the design, but we also gained a lot in the process. We gained a whole extra level of this kind of narrative and storytelling, a timeline, and quotes and storytelling, and we gain more of this kind of African pattern making that is represented, and then other opportunities for introducing other materials. So I think you know, the original kind of carved vault, that form has evolved. But I think, you know, it's one of those things where the budget kind of maybe directs you in a direction that you don't anticipate, but maybe because it was done, you know, not just by me, but by a whole community of people, Burt, the building committee, the president of William & Mary, that it's actually a richer thing in the end.
Well, thank you, Will. And you know, I wish we had more time. It's amazing. We've come to the end of our time. This has been a fantastic panel. In fact, there are people in the chat who are asking if the committee and if this group can come out to the community and have the same kind of discussion in the community. So I just want to thank the Muscarelle Museum, to thank the panelists for doing a great job. I certainly learned a lot tonight, and congratulations as you move to begin celebrating Charter Day. So thank you all for participating. Again, thank you to the museum and all of the participants, and especially to those who are in attendance. We appreciate your interest and participation. And thank you, Caroline, as well. Have a great evening.
And thank you, Phyllis. What a fantastic presentation. Thank you all for participating. I myself learned so much tonight, and I'm sure many in our audience did. So we really appreciate your time. A great session. Have a great evening, everybody.
You too. Take care. Bye.